Welcome to part 5 of the Paris jacket, and here we're going to do the collar. The collar is going to be inserted into the shoulder, and by the end of this chapter you'll have proceeded to this stage here, and deep breath I would say, and we'll get started on it. It's not as hard as you would think, and when you're done with it you're going to go, oh, that's really nice. We will not fix the collar in this stage yet to the shoulder or to the upper seam here. That will all happen later. What we're doing now is simply putting the collar into the shoulder, and then we're going to reward us with a nice hot cup of coffee. So let's see how this is done. We're going to start with the lining on the back. So take your back lining and put it right into this space here, so you know which shoulder goes on which shoulder. And this shoulder here is going to be attached to that shoulder. This is how it's going to sit when it's finished. It's going to work around the collar, and then the other side is going to sit here. So I'm now going to turn this over, and I'm going to put one side on here. Now this is quite an angle, isn't it? But it's all correct. So the first thing to do is lift up your lining, put these pieces edge to edge, one pin here, and now we want to pin this corner point, and we have to be very exact when we're doing this. I'm going to put my hand in here, and then I'm going to go straight down with a pin, and then you're going to turn it over, and you're going to see that it's not exactly on the point. Okay, that is something that happens very easily, so I need to just move it over onto the point. There we go. Turn it back over. That's where it needs to go. Now, one thing that a lot of people then do is they take this pin and they go, bops your ankle, right? But by doing that, you're already shifting it a little bit over. So you don't want to do that. You want to go straight down, right in that point. Take another pin and put that over. Check it. Great. Now you can take the pin out. You can also put another pin here. So we now know that this is perfectly pinned here. Now we're going to do the other side. So you take your piece, swivel it round to the other side. It won't quite lie as flat now. You have to pull it out a little bit to make it lie flat. And you put one pin in, and then you line the edges up, edge to edge here. Make sure that this is nice and flat. And now here comes the difference when you're using interlining. This is not as easy to do, this step, definitely not. Because the interlining will move as well and sometimes give you a false idea of where your marking was when you have done it with interfacing. That can't happen. So I'm going down through the center again, going down to the other side, and as you can see here, I'm almost on it. There we go. Back to the upper side, sure it's nice and flat. I've got this in here. Keep it in there. Take another pin and put it right next to it. Take it out. Now if you want to put it back in just to see and check yourself, yeah, that's fine. So now we've got those in beautifully. Great stuff. That's the lining. Now I need to repeat this step with the upper material, and you can see now how important it was for me to make sure that this was all nice and secure, because it will go all over the shop if you don't do this. So we do the same again. Put it in front of yourself. Put the shoulder on so that your opening is also in the direction of your neck opening. And then we're going to pin these together. You will woo the day if you don't reinforce this. Because this is not a difficult collar. If you follow all these little steps, it'll come out beautiful. Once you start unpicking on something like this, it's not going to come out right. And this is more the usual situation. My other two on the other side came out really close because it's very difficult to do. And it's just a bit of a millimeter wrong, and all of a sudden the point isn't right anymore, and the collar won't fit on the back as easy, and then you start having little pleats. That's why we need to move it over. Right? You can even put the pin in without even turning it over. I put one pin here. Okay, so you find out which method you want to do. I put one pin there and take this one back out. I prefer them on that side, but that's up to you. Because I messed about with it, I'm going to check it again. Yep, it's fine. So I can now put another pin, whoops, not into my finger, please. There we go, in here, and I'm done. Yeah, line it all up. Now I'm going to pin this round again. I'm going to go round to the other side. And pin that together. You have to be very accurate with this. It is worthwhile taking your time. Don't rush a collar like this. Because once you've sewn this in, it's all easy. This is the hardest part. Going through again, see, it's way off again. So if I hadn't marked this, I would have thought that would be right, you know. Just straight on here. Make sure it's right in the center. Hold it. Pin it. Remove the pin. Perfect. Now we've pinned the shoulders in, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and do all the scary bits. Now I'm moving it right onto that cross, and I put my sewing machine needle down. I can check again that it's on that cross. There we go. I can move the pins out because my needle is in. That's not going to go anywhere now. I'm going to reduce my stitch length here to 1.5, and now I'm going to go forward 4 stitches and then backward 4 stitches and then forward again 4 stitches. Make your stitch length longer if you want and continue to the end. Lock in your stitches. It's easier when you're coming obviously from the other side than starting at the point. So this is a bit easier. Take your pin out, start sewing, lock in your stitches. Make absolutely sure all of this is really, really flat. This is where the underneath will want to pleat, and we'll have like little folds so that the fabric pushes up into here. It's easier when it's been done with interfacing because it'll stay in place better. I'm coming up to my little cross, so reduce the stitch length to 1.5. There we go. Go backwards, go forwards 4, backwards again if you like, and I'm close enough. That's just a thick pen there, and I can leave that 1 centimeter seam allowance. Make sure this is really nice and flat here, nothing has moved. Coming up, I'm going to reduce my stitch length to 1.5 again. Same thing, backwards and forwards with a smaller stitch length. Now I can move it off. Check myself again. And perfect. Can do the other one. Find the spot. There we go. Exactly. Can now move out this pin. Short stitch length. 4 forwards, 4 backwards. Make the stitch length a little bit bigger and go to the end. Now we're getting to the most interesting part, but before we do, make sure that you've got all your threads cut off and removed. They don't get in the way, you don't get confused. So clean work surface is always, you know, the secret. Everything else can be messy, but your work needs to be very tidy. You should see my kitchen. Right, so I'm now ready for the next step. And this is the one where you have to be really brave. And we're going to cut, similar as if you were doing a welt pocket or something. We're going to cut right in here so that we can swivel this around, because at the moment couldn't sew it together because you'd have all that bit there. So what I'm going to do is I make sure that I don't catch any of this underneath here, and I'm cutting into the corner. Brave soldiers, right in, right to the point. Yeah, and that's why I use such a small stitch length. We don't want this to fray. I go over to the other side, and I am equally as brave. Move the stuff out of the way underneath. I can feel it with my fingers. If you're not sure, better check it. Don't want to cut into it. Do the same here. Get your scissor in there. Move away anything that's in the way. And cut straight into that corner. And then we're going to do the other one as well. So now this will fit in here because the fabric can now move round and in effect create almost a straight line. So here's where we want to start or end sewing. And one thing happens again, if you put the pin in like that, you're automatically folding it over to that side. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is pin this with vertical pins, please, so that it's easy to see and you can't make a mistake. Line up the center back. Well pinned here is half sewn, as I say. I'm going to put vertical pins all the way along. In this area you can put them in this way as well, but I'm going to do those now because I think that make it much clearer for you. And I work my way over to the other side. Again, I just move it out. We don't want anything to catch underneath it, and that's so easily done. So what you want to do is make sure the fabric is moved over to the other side. So when I turn this over, it's totally flat. That's what we want. Now let me put a pin here so nothing can move over. And then I'm going to pin the rest. There we go, it's lovely and flat on this side. That's what we want. I can now go back to the sewing machine and sew this in. I'm going to do the same on the other side before I do that. And you can also just do this. Grab it at the ends. That's how it needs to sit, right? So you can get the seam on the center here where it's snipped, but that's a good way as well to just see what you're doing, right? Pull it. And then here, because it's much thinner, the fabric, it's going to be much easier to pin. There we go, much easier. But again, because I'm going to start sewing there, I'm just going to move my pin so I can actually start from there. The other thing that some of you experts amongst you will want to do is to run it over. When you do the running over though, it is very easy to get some of the stuff underneath caught, so you really have to pin this. I'm going to show you both methods. I'm going to overrun on this one, and then on the lining I won't. So I can start here, go to there, back up a bit and come over, so that's really secure. I'm going to really tuck this in, tuck it in and fold it over to pin it. And now we're ready to go to the sewing machine and put this collar in properly. This is where it gets really interesting. I'm putting this under, making absolutely sure this is really straight. It's really easy to do this and then catch something underneath it. So fold out of the way what you don't need at the moment, and then I'm just starting exactly where I stopped. I make sure my stitch length is right down again to 1.5, and I just lock my stitches in at the beginning. So I did 3 stitches forward, 3 stitches back. Extend your stitch length again, sure it's nice and flat. Now, here I want to show you, this is what happens. This is what it wants to do, right? And as long as you know that it wants to do that, you can prevent it. Right? I've got this here. I make really sure this is flat. You need to have a bit of pressure here. Now I'm going to go down to the smaller stitch length. When I'm exactly on it, I go backwards a few stitches. I go forward a few stitches. That's it. Turn it over, check. That looks good to me. And here I'm going to do this little trick where you run it over. For experts only, please. Lock your stitches in. There you go. Turn it. Go down the other side. Stitch length down. Lock in, and there you go. That's of course really secure, and I think for somebody that knows how to sew, that's perfect. Try it. If you can't do it, you know, just go from that point. To me, that's probably the better method, but it also is the method that can go wrong more easily. Now I can take my pins out, and I can have a sigh of relief because all of this has really caught it nicely. So the key really is to do all these steps, do them very slowly, and make very sure that you get this right. You can never overpin this enough. I'm just going to use the little sleeve ironing board here to put everything on because that's easier. Now you've got different options when you do the ironing of this. The shoulders are always ironed apart. You can iron this straight in, so we've got a nice little pleat there. Do the same on the other side. Iron your seam in, iron this apart. But in order to do that, you'd have to snip it, of course, so that there is no tension. So I can snip this, fold in here the fabric so that you get this nice corner. There we go. Give it a very good press from the outside as well. Admire how beautiful it looks. It's quite a feat. Guys, if you get this like that, then I am really, really impressed. You can give yourself a pat on the back because that's not easy. And while I'm ironing this out, I'll tell you a story about my first shawl collars when I was an apprentice. And it was my first year, and my boss, a very lovely lady called Heidrun, she went on holiday, but she still needed to deliver some dressing gowns to a company called Neue Mode, which was a fashion company like Borda, and she hadn't got them done, and I said, don't worry, I'll do it. I had no idea how. No idea. So today 3 of these dressing gowns would take me probably what, a day, if that, 6 hours at the very most, and I took a week because I could not work out how it went, and I went to sleep and I couldn't sleep, and I woke up and I thought, what am I going to do? It was 1983, I think, or was it 1982 even? There was no internet. I could ask no one, and I had said I will do it, and I still remember it. I think they had to be in on the 12th, and I just, when I finally got it done and I called the courier, and I tell you it didn't look as nice as this, I was so relieved. And you're so lucky, or we all are so lucky, that the internet is there and all that knowledge is all at your fingertips. It's brilliant, because that way you can never get stuck like that. That was awful, just the knowledge to say, oh yes I can, and then I really couldn't, but I did get it done in the end. So you know, where there is a will, there is a way. Now the collar is finished, got it in. I actually really love the contrast. I think that's a bit bland, but I suppose if you had like a very patterned dress underneath it, then that would be fine. Just imagine a dress in this fabric underneath it as well. Wouldn't that be so cool? Anyway, I've done them both, and we're now ready for the next step. So you want to now move on to chapter 6, and in chapter 6 we're going to close the side seams and close our hem.